Have you ever wanted something so badly you'd be willing to do anything to get it, even possibly waste years of your life waiting for that thing? This is a sentiment us gamers are not strangers to. We'll take years off our life to just get a glimpse at the new Zelda game, for example. That brings me to today's game in question, Eternights. Man, it still doesn't even feel real. I've been waiting 4 years for Eternights to become a reality. I've been following the creator since before the project was even a thing. This game holds a lot more significance to me personally. If you're new to the channel, let me elaborate. There is no franchise I identify more with than Persona. It's a series of games that speak to me at such a personal level to the point where I view Persona 5 as the greatest game of all time. I've intentionally placed Persona 5 clips over the majority of my videos because I think it's such a shining example of what quality is in a game. It's a title that respects your time. It has an addicting gameplay loop. The story is excellent, the voice acting is superb, and unsurprisingly, it has a soundtrack that I'd argue sets the standard for video game music in general. In my head, when I really think about it, Persona 5 is the closest image in my head when I try and think of a video game that's perfect. And no, that doesn't mean I actually think P5 is actually perfect. Out of all the games I've played, which isn't exactly the most to be fair, no game really comes close to Persona 5 when it comes to capturing the essence of perfection. But that's all besides the point. We aren't talking about Persona 5 in this video. No, today I want to take a look at how the Phantom Thieves were able to inspire real-life people to chase after something they truly believe in, and how that unironically influences the player. Before that, there's a lot about Eternights I feel the need to bring up. It'll provide a lot of context as I go through the story and the gameplay and blah blah blah. Honestly, I just find the idea of this game fascinating. Think about it for a second. A dating sim mixed with traditional hack and slash action combat? Oh yeah, did I also mention that this game takes place during the fucking apocalypse? And if that wasn't bad enough, your character gets his arm cut off. Alright, those things aren't the same. I don't think I've ever seen Sony push an indie game so hard before. Combined with the fact that a dating sim hack and slash probably falls under the nichest category in existence, and you wonder how it got the green light. Jae Hyun-Yu is a name you're probably not familiar with. Maybe the name FKK Cloud rings a bell? Either way, this person is the sole visionary behind Eternights. Before the reveal trailer back in 2022, Jae would routinely post about his game, often citing how his project was directly influenced by Personas 3, 4, and 5. These tweets, or whatever they're called now, go as far back as 2019. Hey, didn't some really big JRPG come out around that time? Wow, how convenient. Persona 5's initial release was never just a coincidence. Jay has said in the past that while he always wanted to mix romance with real-time action, it wasn't until he played all the modern Persona games where it kind of all came together. I just want to take a second and wow. How fucking cool is that? Have you ever seen a piece of art and been inspired? So inspired, in fact, you might go ahead and do something crazy like trying to emulate the artist behind the metaphorical brush? If you haven't, then here's your perfect example. To my knowledge, I believe Jay was a game developer before Eternights. But when it comes to a major game coming to consoles and PC, Eternights was Jay's first real opportunity to make his mark in the industry. Don't quote me on all that. I'm not entirely sure if I'm accurate, and nowadays when you look up Jay or his studio, you won't find anything prior to 2022. Alright, I think that's enough of a preamble. I've been talking a lot about the circumstances regarding Eternights' release and some direct inspiration, sure, but I haven't exactly talked about the actual video game, have I? Let's remedy that, because I think combined with the 4-year wait, there's been plenty of build up for me personally, and for a lot of other people, I'm sure. At this point, I'd usually explain everything with as much detail as I can and give my overall feelings, but with Eternights, I want to take things in a different direction. Plus, I kinda already talked about the core of the gameplay in another video, which you should totally check out, by the way. Alright, that's enough self-promotion for today. Today, I wish to cover the things that weren't in the demo, as well as cover the many references found in Eternights. Alright, I get it! Also, there's something about this game that just kinda hit different for me, and it helped me realize something I'll talk about later. But if you didn't watch my video covering this game's demo, let me summarize. Eternights is a video game. Alright, that's obvious. Eternights is split up into two major aspects of gameplay. You have your dungeon crawling, which introduces the combat system, and of course the dating sim portion of the game. Since the dating sim stuff ties into the story, let me start with the combat. Having put around I can say that while not perfect, the combat in Eternights is something pretty special. I don't mean to geek out since I have a lot of personal attachment to this game, but I think with enough evidence you may find yourself agreeing with me. So yeah, this is a hack and slash, which means you're going to be mashing the attack button over and over again to eviscerate your foes. To be blunt, if you don't like games like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, I don't think this is a game you should play. Nothing in the combat is really tailored for people that aren't into things like quick time events and cooldown timers. But if you're like me and you're obsessed with mashing buttons until the controller breaks, then there is definitely something here for you. And if you're willing to look for it yourself, it's something you're going to end up falling in love with. I say this because a lot of reviews are criticizing the combat since it feels repetitive. Looking back as I edit the video together, and yeah, it kinda looks like it's repetitive, but it's as they say, the devil is in the details. Like the perfect dodge mechanic, arguably the backbone of the entire combat system. One might look at it like you would Witch Time from Bayonetta, but when you start to mess around a little, the mechanically suddenly goes much deeper than it initially seems. You could just time your dodge to attack the enemy that's right in front of you, but if you're aware enough, you could see an opening from an oncoming projectile to jumpstart your combo. You see what I mean? The perfect dodge isn't just a tool to get a few hits in, it's a mechanic that constantly keeps the player engaged with the combat. You're constantly thinking every time an enemy crosses your path. It incentivizes the player to explore every attack possible. Kind of reminds me of another game I've played. Ah yes, another franchise that's not a coincidence. I'm beginning to sense a pattern. I should mention that there's 3 different difficulty options. Since I consider myself an action game master, there was only one option for me. Expert mode, designed for the true hardcores. Has the enemy frames in between attacks drop down nearly to 1. Dude, seriously, when you're in the thick of it, you have to think so fast that one wrong move can melt your health bar down to 0. For most, this seems a bit extra. But man, this is exactly the type of shit I need in video games. Kick my ass a little. Teach me how best to use my tools through pain. I know this sounds kind of fucked up when you think about it, but I don't know, there's something about a game teaching you a lesson that allows me to really get into it, if that makes any sense. I feel the constant need to become one with the game. I want my movements to feel second nature, almost like going Ultra Instinct. And Eternights is able to give me that constant high as I'm bobbing, weaving, and bodying my adversaries. Things move so fucking fast that you can't put yourself in the traditional action game mindset. One wrong move can ruin the entire flow of the fight. And that's what makes Eternights' combat system so unique. The flow. While the inspirations are quite apparent, like the pause right before you input the final attack in a combo, hey, I've seen that before, it's the general flow that brings it all together. There's a lot more to the combat I'm gonna mention for sure, but I think it's imperative I highlight the importance of flow in the combat. It's something I feel is often neglected in other videos when it comes to action games. To make my point, I want to point out one of the most egregious examples of ruining the flow in combat. Kingdom Hearts 2 has like some of the craziest action combat of all time, and ironically enough, it's very similar to Eternights in one key way. You kinda have to go out of your way to find most of the innovation made to push the genre forward. You play a game like KH2 because you want to take a deep dive into what this genre has to offer. So what did they do for Kingdom Hearts 3? Oh, I just don't fall now. I just keep attacking? Is anyone gonna do anything? I think you get my point. Eternights doesn't have this problem. While you have more than enough tools to decimate your enemies, the same thing could be said on the other side. Whether that's through the enemy layout, the enemy selection, or just the size of the room. Your enemies also have the tools to lay the smackdown on you. Trust me, if you're as masochistically inclined as I am, you're going to want to play on expert mode to really feel everything I'm saying. But be warned, this game isn't for the faint of heart. If you can't take agonizing pain like this, damn it, shit! Come on! You should probably stick to normal, but I can imagine the game isn't nearly as fun. I think the intended way to play Eternights is in the expert mode. I mean, why else would Jay include it? I think he really wanted us to feel not only just the fear the enemies present to us, but also to enhance the feeling that this really is the apocalypse. And man, that feeling of growth is just done so well in this game. When I played the demo, I played on normal just because I wanted to get the experience most people are going to have for comparison's sake, but I don't know. Final Fantasy 16 kind of ruined normal difficulties for me. So expert mode it is. It's just kind of nuts to think that it'll look like this when you first start playing, but with enough time and a bit of patience, the game will end up looking like this. I think the expert mode is a huge reason for that. Dude, with enough enemy encounters, you're going to be chaining so many perfect dodges together. You might end up feeling like me where the game almost feels like it's moving in slow motion. You could get to the point where you feel like you're Neo from the Matrix, where even the hardest enemies won't pose any challenge. It's that started from the bottom now we're here feeling I love so much. You feel so out of your depth when you first start playing, but there's a moment where you're styling so fucking hard on your opponents that even in the middle of a fight, you'll realize just how much better you've gotten. I've played a lot of action games, and I'm not saying Eternights has the best combat system. Certainly not. You don't get any iframes after you've taken a hit. Oh my god! What I'm trying to say is that Eternights has a combat system that relies on player expression, which at least to me is the most important part of an action game. Man, wouldn't it be so boring if you and your friend played the same game and you ended up having the exact same experience? I don't mean from an enjoyment level, more so what you're going to remember about the game. That sounds really boring. In action games, player expression is the aspect that needs to shine the most in my opinion, because that's where most, if not all of the variety is going to come from. Eternights doesn't have this in the sense of different weapon combos. More so it introduces you to the idea of finding a style that works for you. Like, did you know there's a parry in this game? If you think the slowdown after a perfect dodge makes the game too easy, just go with the parry and you'll have even more difficulty. Did you know there's a dedicated heavy attack that has its own 3-hit combo? It's things like that that allow the player to express themselves and really put themselves in the shoes of the avatar doing all these crazy moves. The last thing I need to mention specifically are the elemental attacks. I feel the need to because these do a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to the hype factor in combat. You see this little circle up here? Every attack and perfect dodge will fill this meter up, and once full you'll be able to execute an elemental attack. There are 4 elements in the game: fire, ice, electricity, and what I can only assume is a combination of all the elements? Yeah, this icon doesn't really give me anything to go on. When you use one of these attacks on an enemy with the opposite element, you'll get a little quick time event where you knock down the enemy's shields and deal devastating damage. And look, I get it. I like pretty colors and cool ass camera angles. But man, when you have the context that this is an indie game made by one person, you find yourself appreciating every little detail. It doesn't hurt that the quick time events are quite engaging on both fronts. Sure, you get plenty of time, but sometimes you'll be so entranced by what you're seeing, you may end up dropping the combo. And I mean, hey, if you want references, you may recognize this sound if you're familiar with Sonic the Hedgehog. God, this game is so cool. While the elemental attacks aren't the most engaging from a gameplay standpoint, not gonna lie, I'm still riding the high of those icon fights in FF16. Even if what you see doesn't match the quality of a AAA game, these are still just fucking rad as hell. My man is deadass hitting these abominations with a wombo combo before hitting him with a giant sword to cap off the combo. What more can I ask for, really? I'm getting the satisfaction of bodying opponents with my regular repertoire of moves, while also getting the high of absolutely demolishing something that's way bigger than me with the elemental attacks. And that's all I really got with the combat. I've been kinda dragging things out, but there's not much more to it than that. Going back to the point that got this all started, all of these aspects separately don't amount to much. Combined together though, and you've got a combat system that is really something special. It just has the sauce, man. Quite frankly, that's the most basic way I can put it. It feels so smooth to engage with. Nothing ever feels unfair. And all things considered, it comes together to make for a combat system that shouldn't be looked at as just another hack and slash. It's more than that, and that's why I feel it's special. I can't make it much simpler than that, but that's just one aspect of the gameplay. And I don't know how to really put this into words, but it's probably the aspect of the game that players will find the least interesting out of the two. That's not a bad thing. As I've explained, I think the combat is really good, but it's the other aspect of the game that got people really curious. That, of course, is the dating sim mechanics Jay really wanted to include in Eternights. Going back to what I said earlier, Jay always had a vision in mind when crafting his first real game. Dating and romance, and really just the overall theme of love, is something that I can tell is very important to Jay. And you'll see that as you engage with the dating sim mechanics. I mean, really, you kind of have to. You're only doing yourself a disservice, but it kind of goes beyond that. I want to talk more about that, but I know there's some of you out there that don't want the story spoiled for you. I'm kind of going out of my way to make it a point this time because how much you enjoy the story and these characters is going to heavily influence your opinion of the game. I don't like telling people not to watch all the content in my video, but this time I feel the need to. This story can hit right at home for a lot of people, and I don't want to rob that moment away from them. So if you don't want this story spoiled for you, and trust me, you don't, I suggest clicking off the video or going to this timestamp. I'll give you a few seconds to decide if you want to proceed. The day starts like any other. You're hanging out with your friend Chani. You set up a dating profile online. After enough joking around, you decide to relax and unwind by watching TV, a typical activity for a couple of teenagers. Eventually, the day comes to an end. You say goodbye to your friend for the day and get ready for bed, but after some initial reservations, luck seems to be on your side as you get your first match on this dating app. Whoa, things are looking up. This girl seems a bit weird, but I think she's worth giving a shot, so we set up a date for tomorrow, and already my imagination is going wild. Unfortunately though, life doesn't tend to work out the way you want it to sometimes. While the day starts off normally, that comfort is quickly taken away. As you arrive at Central Station, the citizens of the city start acting weird, to the point where they start getting violent and attack each other. You get a panicked call from Chani, asking about your well-being, but all you can do is think of what your next move should be. Instinctively, you decide to go to the nearest shelter. It's only after we get to the shelter where we learn how truly dire things are. An infection spread from an unknown source has caused massive walls to appear across the city, leaving those exposed to become infected. After a few days of trying to stay sane, the unthinkable happens. The shelter rumbles and the door that had been securely locked up to this point slowly opens, leaving Chani in a state of hysteria. Just look at the fear in Chani's eyes. Look at his facial expression. Your best friend has no idea what to make of the situation. Instinctively though, you know there's no other choice but to explore, because if something does come knocking, there's nowhere to run. After exploring the shelter a little, we find ourselves at the Underground Railway where we run into the pop star we saw on TV earlier, Yuna, and another girl named Lena. Dude, this is crazy! Chani was freaking out earlier over Yuna, and now we get to meet her? That's so cool. Wait, the world's ending, isn't it? Yeah, maybe not that cool. After a brief introduction and deliberation, the group decides their best course of action is to try and escape. I mean, strength in numbers, right? Yeah, if only life were so simple. What the fuck do we do? One of our friends just got massacred right in front of us. Let's just get the hell out of here, What the fuck? This is it. This is how I'm gonna die. This is how we're gonna die.
I'm sorry. I told you yachts were super romantic.
Whoa, is this the afterlife? Oh, it's the chick I was supposed to meet up with. Hey, what the fuck? Kinda left me hanging there. Huh? You want me to save the world? I'm gonna have to pass. Not really interested in that.
Are you sure? Please work for me. Fine. I'll annoy you into working for me.
What the? Is this deja vu? Haha, I see what you did there. You know what? I respect that. You got me. I'll save the world. Alright, that's enough of the character acting. I know that you probably have no idea what's going on, so I feel the need to elaborate. I decided to introduce the story in this me-you form of storytelling because what I think the introduction establishes is just how personal this story feels. If any of this looks familiar, it's because the dating sim aspect is where the persona inspiration shines through the most. However, I'd argue it takes that inspiration much further. Every choice you make matters. Everything you say matters. You can't just speak recklessly, because in Eternights, you'll never know how the other person will react. It's that feeling of uncertainty that I love so much. Don't get me wrong, Persona 5, Great story, fantastic writing, but I don't really ever feel like I have any agency when I'm talking to the characters outside of the social links. They may react and say something in direct response, but then they just kind of move on with the rest of the conversation, and it just kind of leaves me wanting more. Sure, technically Eternights is the same way, but the responses made available to you feel so genuine and personal that even if you've seen the cutscenes before, you don't ever really know how the other character will react. And yeah, I'm sorry the intro was kind of long in the tooth there. I just wanted to make sure I highlighted just how well the first act does in hooking in the player. Before I get into the main event, which is obviously the main cast, let me just flesh out the stuff I neglected to mention earlier. Obviously the world is ending, but why is it ending? And why now? So according to that girl that invited us to a yacht date, her name is Lux by the way, she is what is called an architect, one of two in existence. The other architect, Umbra, is in the process of reawakening, which if she does, means the annihilation of humanity, resulting in a total reset of the world. If you were paying attention, you might have noticed at the beginning of the game that there's a new anti-aging drug that's set to release to the public. The drug's name? Eternights. Ah, I see what you did there. The Eternights drug is Umbra's way of infecting the planet. Pretty fitting, as the Eternights drug was essentially a way to prolong life, a gift humanity just isn't ready for yet. Your objective is obvious. Stop Umbra before she reawakens. To do that, we're gonna need to tear down a few walls, both metaphorically and literally. And that's kind of it. I'm not holding out, I swear. It's just that really is it. Sure, things do happen as you break past each wall, but I mean honestly, Lux and Umbra, that chick whose name I can barely remember, God, what is it? Delia, I think that's what it is. Yeah, none of them are really important. I don't mean to throw shade, mind you. Their minor roles are served for a greater purpose, which is of course the main cast. When you look at these images, you probably just see a cast of anime characters, and you probably don't think much of it. But these characters are far more than what meets the eye. Not only are they well written in my opinion, but also buried deep within each character, there's a personal story I believe Jay wanted us to hone in on. I may be overthinking things a bit, but I couldn't help but feel that these characters weren't just made to fulfill a story. They are personal stories Jay left players to seek out so he could share just how much this project meant to him. As I alluded to earlier, Jay was very open on the development of Eternights after its initial reveal. Now that we're far enough away for people to form an opinion on the game, Jay recently shared this update regarding the positive reception Eternights saw over on Steam. I want to take a second and read just a bit of this post out because it gives you a small glimpse of the type of person Jay is, and how that's reflected in his first major project. To be completely honest, I would have been happy if I could have gotten at least 70%. I can't help but think about areas I could have done better. As I worked on it, the game's scope kept growing, and doubts about realizing my ambitions crept in. In 2021, I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity to work with Sony and make Eternights a PlayStation exclusive. A year later, in 2022, I was blown away to see my title get announced next to Final Fantasy XVI, the series I grew up with. Honestly, it was a bittersweet moment for me. I was happy that I was able to make something to be featured on State of Play, but sad that there was only so much a solo full-time developer could do. I think you get my point. Jay didn't have to go into full detail about this stuff, but he did, and I think that means something. I can't shake the feeling that Jay wanted to share more of his story, just some things he didn't want to share publicly for whatever reason. So he decided to leave these tales to the characters he crafted. A fitting way to share your story, I must admit. Alright, let's get started. Yuna, the biggest idol in the world, is the first character you meet besides Chani. Tied to the element of fire, Yuna has quite the fiery personality. In the introduction of the story, Yuna told us she was looking for her friend Jisoo, and her social link revolves around that. Apparently, this Jisoo person is also an idol, albeit not at the same level as Yuna. What made their friendship so special is that Yuna felt like she could just be herself. She didn't have to be the character Yuna, she could just be Yuna, the 18-year-old girl who likes hanging out with her friends and writing music. One day, Jisoo's friends ask her to meet them at the bar. Yuna warns Jisoo that going to the bar might damage her public image. Jisoo ignores Yuna's warning, which goes just about how you'd expect.
Jisoo, a musical prodigy, is causing a stir online after a photo of her drinking at a bar surfaced on social media.
It was after this broadcast when the world-ending event started, and Yuna hasn't seen Jisoo since then. Imagine losing your best friend, not knowing where they are, or if they're even alive. It's a thought that's on Yuna's mind constantly. One thing Yuna always wondered was what it would have been like to go to school, since she and Jisoo couldn't due to their status. This gives me an idea. Hey Yuna, I got some place I want to take you. Yeah, Now we're talking. To distract Yuna from worrying about Jisoo, we take her out to school to give her that sense of normalcy in the apocalypse. Eventually, we're able to find a way for Yuna to speak with Jisoo. Although it's indirect, Yuna is finally able to have that chat she's been waiting for since the world ended. In the end, Yuna finally got to get that peace of mind she had been seeking for so long. Knowing that her friend's okay is just the push she needs to help save the world. Because as our primary healer, we're definitely going to need her. This is just what's presented in the actual story. Looking deeper, I noticed two things. The first, and this is rather unimportant, is that Yuna is clearly a love letter to An Takamaki. I can't find it handy right now, but Jay specifically designed Yuna to mimic An in a few ways. They're both in positions where they're viewed highly by society. They're both beautiful, and they both use fire as their element. The second, which is far more important, is who Yuna is to Jay personally. When I look at Yuna, I can't help but feel she was written in a way to expose the player to someone in Jay's life personally. Obviously, I can't refer to someone who may not exist. I'm using my imagination pretty wildly, so just try to have fun with it. Yuna feels like a character that expresses the notion of meeting your heroes. Wild, I know, but let me land. In this universe, Yuna is the greatest thing since sliced bread. She's like the Taylor Swift of this world. We often forget that behind the personas these celebrities put on, these are real people like you and me. They make the same mistakes we make. They eat the way we do. But because of the way they sway public opinion, we view them as anything other than human. Reaching out to someone you admire can be really scary. You constantly think, man, what if I bother them? Or, they don't have time for my question. I'm just being annoying. That feeling of rejection is something that always creeps up when we want to converse with our heroes. Yuna represents how you can approach someone you admire if you show them the same respect and decency as you would anyone else. Because like I said, they're just like you and me. And Yuna isn't the only one who's like this. Every character's story fits this structure, which gives me a perfect segue into our next pal in the apocalypse, Sia. I'm struggling to find the words to explain just how much this character means to me. Sia is probably the person I spent the most time with across my entire playtime. Sia prides herself on how smart she is. Tied with the element of ice, she's also as cool as they come. Earlier in the game, we had a navigator of sorts called Arya. After destroying the first major wall, Arya disappears for a bit. So Sia takes over as the navigational leader when she's introduced. Regarding her social link, man, saying it's my favorite in the game just doesn't do it justice. It's a story that just hits right at home depending on the person you are. Before the world started coming to an end, Sia was a researcher at a lab. A pretty good one too. Science is something that is core to Sia's being. It's her passion in life, the mysteries of the universe, and the proposition of finding the answers behind them is what drives Sia. But really, this isn't just about science. Sia is just someone who's passionate about the things they love. Sometimes that can be to the detriment of those around you. Sia was working on a project to discover more about black holes. However, she got a little too eager about her research. Had the project not been shut down, nearly 500 people would have lost their lives. A thought that weighs on Sia's mind very heavily. Although Sia knows we're going to need to find science equipment to help save the world from the apocalypse, she's doing her best to contain her excitement. Why? Yeah, I get it, she made a mistake and almost got people killed, but does she have to suffer this guilt for the rest of her life? Sia's intent was never to hurt anyone. She just wanted to share her passion with the world. And tell me, what's wrong with that? As a content creator, I can't help but feel some certain similarities. I'm not gonna lie, editing these things together, it's a lot sometimes. Managing this with my full-time job, tied in with the little time I get with my friends and family, it can kinda be a chore. I'm sure other content creators feel like this, but there's a sense of relief after editing a video. And I'd like to think that my videos turn out pretty well. So I want to share that with people in my circle. But I mean, come on. Not everyone's interested in an hour-long video about why Final Fantasy 16 is goated or whatever. Sharing your passion with people can be kind of unnerving. You don't know how people are going to react to what you have to say. And for something as personal as making videos like these, opinions are going to matter. Something that genuinely terrifies me is showing a video to my best friend and him telling me that it sucked. I know there's no malice behind his intent, but still, that would hurt. I think Jay also had this feeling. Imagine working on a game for 4 years. You're probably going to bring that up in conversation from time to time. Some people really won't give you the time of day. And I mean, nothing against those people. I can't really know what's going on in their lives, but I don't know. Doesn't that suck? I think Sia was Jay's outlet to express those feelings he wanted to share with those close to him, but maybe he didn't want to overshare, if that makes any sense. Eventually, we're able to help Sia rediscover that passion for science, because without that, there really isn't any chance of us saving the world. I don't know why, but this story did something to me. I learned a lot about myself while helping Sia rediscover her love for science. Man, it's kind of insane how fucking real this game gets. Can we maybe tone it down on the real life parallels, please? I'm starting to feel a little insecure. Let's just say Sia just might be that special someone I've been looking for all along. But, spoilers! I failed to mention this before, but there was actually one other character introduced the same time Sia was. Her name is Min, a shy girl who happens to be the star of her track team. Min was with her track team when the apocalypse started, and things seemed to be going pretty well. On a routine supply hunt though, the worst happens. Min's team gets attacked by the infected, and all she can do is cower in fear as her best friend Bona gets massacred right in front of her. Wow. I mean, yeah, I'd be pretty messed up too if my best friend got torn limb from limb right in front of me. Min's element is electricity, which fits well because there's an uncertainty that comes with it. She's very indecisive and lacks much confidence, and can you really blame her? It's not made very clear, but I'm assuming Min already had her powers by the time this event occurred. You'd think a person would have no problem helping out someone who needs them, but it's not really that simple. The world is fucking ending, people, hello? This enemy looks straight out of fucking Dark Souls. Any normal person would either shit their pants and start screaming or lose their mind because they wouldn't be able to understand what's going on. Repairing a psyche that's damaged to this degree isn't an easy task, but Min has an idea to solve this issue. Min asks us to be her coach, since for some reason when we go against the infected we seem to have no fear. Throughout the course of each hangout, Min always remarks at how amazing we are, and how she wants to have the same level of confidence we have. I don't know though. I think Min is reaching a little bit. I mean, we're not that amazing, are we? Really, we're not showing her our confidence. We're helping her come to terms with what happened. It's less like Sia where she made a mistake. What Min did was perfectly rational. It's about finding a way to move past a traumatic experience. For Min, she believes she needs to be more confident so when the moment comes to help a friend in need, she won't have to second guess herself anymore. She may have been the star on the track team, but she never really saw herself that way. She always admired her friend Bona, not as a runner, but as a person. Sure, Bona was no slouch in the track department, but it was more that she was able to create a sense of unity between the team. Let's be real, teenagers can be kind of awkward, so Bona going out of her way to make sure everyone on the team got along is something Min really appreciated. This social link isn't really about helping this character discover something new. It's about bringing that sense of normalcy back so Min can rediscover that part of herself she locked away. Really, that's what the entire game is about. It's about taking what life gives you and making the most of it. It's the end of the world, and we're some of the lucky few that survived. What do we do now that the world's in this state? All you can really do is make do with what you got. When I look at Min, I can't help but think that Jay was trying to convey his feelings on the worries of public perception. Sony really pushed this game. There's an unspoken pressure us gamers don't realize on the developer side. What would happen if Eternights came out and people didn't like it? What if it was received so poorly it would rank among some of the worst games ever released? These are thoughts I think Jay constantly had in his mind, and Min shows us that he really was looking for a way to develop some sort of thicker skin. I mean, I would. I don't know how I would take it if people told me my project sucked. And finally, out of the romanceable characters, we have Johan. Johan actually shows up pretty early in the game, but you meet him in what appears to be some sort of dream sequence. The ethereal feeling in the air, the swaying water, the color palette. I think this might just be my favorite place in the entire game. I could honestly just stand here for hours. Alright, that's enough. So Johan isn't like the other three characters I've been talking about. He's much more involved in the actual plot, so to speak. Johan is actually well over 800 years old. He's similar to Delia. He's an immortal, which means he kinda transcends the whole time thing. Unlike Delia though, he's fighting for Lux, but his storyline doesn't really focus on that. 800 years ago, Umbra and Lux did battle to decide whose will would control the world. Before the big battle, Johan and his brother got into an argument leading Johan to tell his brother that he hates him. In the heat of the moment, when you're stressing over the fate of the world, you can see why Johan is so upset. Johan's brother wasn't taking the situation seriously, and hey, if the world's fate was at stake, I'd probably do the same thing. Maintaining your relationship with your siblings can be hard. There's a different level of expectation when you're dealing with family. Even the smallest mistake can set you off because all you want is for your brother or sister to thrive. You don't want to see them struggle. That would kill you. What Johan didn't realize is that even though he was goofing off, his brother always knew what was important, and in the moment of truth, Johan's brother had no problem sacrificing himself to save his sibling. It's only after meeting us where Johan and his brother are able to come to an agreement, and Johan is able to move past the trauma of watching his brother die right in front of him. Unfortunately, I can't say too much else. Johan's social link starts in like the last act of the game, but for what it's worth, I'd say he left quite the impression. When you reach rank 6 with each of these characters, they'll each give you the opportunity to confirm your true feelings for them. You're gonna have to think long and hard before you lock in your choice because, come on, is anyone really going to romance everyone? Well, someone had to do it. I know people are looking at this and thinking, oh, of course, the anime game is unnecessarily horny. Classic anime. It's not like that at all. You're not just going on dates with these people. You're stepping out of your comfort zone not only to help them, but so they can help you too. Trying to live a normal life. Sharing our love for the things that interest us. Finding that inner strength within ourselves. And remembering what's truly important. These are things we all experience, and sometimes when these problems are in the forefront of our minds, it kind of makes our lives feel apocalyptic in a way. To have these experiences and share them with people who may come from different worlds than us was something I never knew I needed. I love the social links in Persona 5. They came at a time in my life when I really needed them, but peeling back that extra layer and making it feel that much more personable, yeah, that's the stuff. Before we wrap up the story, there's 2 more characters I want to talk about real quick. First, I want to talk about Chani. Of course, the prototypical best friend character. But just like the rest of the cast, it feels just a bit more real. Chani is the first person you meet, and it's established pretty quickly that you and him are pretty good friends. Best friends even. But when the world starts to crumble, that bond is tested to its limits. Chani starts acting like an asshole after we initially survived the infected. He's pretty jealous he doesn't have any powers. Chani has a huge crush on Yuna, so to see her jaw drop every time we decimate an enemy doesn't exactly help the situation. Dude, in like the first real dungeon of the game, Chani is straight up cock blocking you.
Oh, you think you're better than the train because you have powers?
Dude, chill the fuck out. I'll tell ya, if any of my real life friends did me like this, I'd snuff them right in the kisser and never talk to them again. Eventually, Chani opens up and tells us the reason he was so jealous wasn't because Yuna liked us more. It's because he feels like a liability. He's surrounded by people that can do all these amazing things. His best friend is like a hero straight out of a manga. How else do you expect him to feel? I feel the need to remind everyone that these characters, minus Johan of course, are all like 18 years old. That's such a pivotal time in our lives. Some of us go to the workforce, some go and continue their studies. The one constant is that when you're 18, you're still in the process of developing. It's true that we as humans are hypothetically always evolving, constantly finding ways to better ourselves, but sometimes our minds waver and we let the negativity surrounding us get the best of us. Chani didn't just want to impress the girl of his dreams, he also wanted to help everyone, but there's nothing he can really do but support them from the sidelines. Even his stint as the team's navigator is short-lived when Sia shows up. No matter what he does, things just don't seem to go his way. Back when Chani was in school, he was constantly bullied by the people around him, a situation that is apparent to quite a few of us. Chani never really liked the kids in school anyways, besides us of course, and his jealousy stems from the fact that he wanted to shove it in the people that labeled him a loser. Although Chani has a pretty warped view on the situation, he doesn't forget what's really important. He's able to take himself out of the situation and help the heroes the world really needs. I want to highlight 2 specific moments in the game. Right at the beginning, when crafting your dating profile with Chani, he says this.
I know what your name is. Smartass.
Near the end of the game, after that special someone's been taken from you, feeling nothing but the sting of defeat, Chani says,
Yeah, of course. But you're also, you're a lovable smartass who is way out of his depth and needs his best friend.
This moment solidifies his entire character for me. What better way to calm your best friend down, the person who's going to save the world, than by going back to the basics? It's such a simple thing. You'd almost forgot that Chani thinks of us in this way, but at that crucial moment, you always knew your best friend would be there for you at the moment of truth. Finally, we have the protagonist. Isn't this guy silent? No. That is certainly not the case. The idea of a silent protagonist has this stigma attached to it that it's a blank canvas for the player to insert themselves. I guess that's technically true here too, but once again, peel back that extra layer and there's much more to it than that. The dialogue responses and basically anything the protagonist says that isn't voiced all have this level of care put in when crafting them. I can't help but feel there's more to this guy than the surface suggests. I don't just look at the protagonist as my avatar to engage with the characters and story. I see him as the most important member of the cast. Like Joker from Persona 5, this guy is the center of the entire friend group, meaning these guys probably wouldn't hang out with each other if he wasn't there. That comes with a bit of responsibility attached to it, and it's up to you to manage the emotions of 5 other people. Yeah, the game's obviously going to have dialogue that just moves the narrative along, but I constantly found myself thinking very carefully before I made any decision. It could have been something as simple as trying to lighten the mood. I always wanted to make sure I chose the response I thought was best suited for the conversation in the moment, and sometimes no matter how hard you try, there's just nothing that can be said to help the situation. That feeling of not being able to help anyone is really where the dating sim mechanics really hit me. These games that focus so much on storytelling often paint the main hero as some sort of perfect being. They can't make any wrong moves, and if they do, the consequences are usually minor. That isn't really the case here. Sure, you have this cool glowing arm. Yeah, you can transform it into anything you want. That's not really the issue. The issue is you just can't rely on your glowing arm for everything. Sometimes you need to talk these issues out with someone, and that can be really hard sometimes. It's the core element that makes the social link so interesting. The only thing that sucks is that the protagonist obviously has the fewest voice lines in the game. The English voice cast is really fucking good. I think everyone was cast just right and the direction is spot on. I don't want to get into it since this video's length is... But I'll just say this. It's pretty funny that the stoic and serious Johan is voiced by the guy who did this. And the protagonist is no exception. I think that Brandon Winkler did a fantastic job as the protagonist, and he definitely brought him to life in a way most silent protagonists can. But to be a bit selfish, I wish he had more opportunities. The guy certainly knows how to grunt and scream. I just wish he was given more of an opportunity to showcase his talents. I don't know what it is, but I just think if the protagonist was given more of a chance to shine, the stories and characters would have hit that much harder. Sometimes the dialogue choices can feel a little too real, if that makes any sense.
I guess the app thinks I like crazy women. Do I? I should really stop visiting those websites.
Don't struggle. It'll just make things difficult for everyone.
Let me go!
Dude. Sorry we're late.
What happened?
Sia. She's...
No. It's still not over.
Isn't it strange how at the heart of a storm, there is always a calm?
Let's go.
I can't go. I want to, but... I can bend the laws of this universe, but I can't break them. No matter how hard I try.
I believe in you.
I know. That's why...
But I think we've talked about that long enough. The final act starts off with a dream sequence where you're asked who the most important person in your life is. This is one of the hardest decisions in the game. We spent all this time getting to know each other. We've seen each other grow amongst one another. How can you possibly pick just one person who's that important? Right here is where it all made sense to me. Eternights isn't just your standard JRPG. It's not just a dating sim. It's not just a hack and slash. It's a game that challenges the player at such a deep emotional level. I was always curious why Jay decided to go with the theme of an apocalypse, but after playing through it, I think I understand. When things are at their worst, when we feel at our lowest, when all hope has evaded us, you're at your most vulnerable. You're more accepting of the idea of change when the state of the world is like this because everyone around you is in the same boat, so to speak. On a normal day, you might think of yourself as just another speck on the planet, just one of billions across the world. But with the threat of annihilation present, you become much more important. What would you do if not only your world, but the world was coming to an end? It's those simple questions that constantly keep you thinking when you engage with just about everything in the game. And to have the final question ask us who the most important person in our life is, wow, this shit is raw as hell. After making your selection, this character gets abducted and eventually fuses with Umbra to create a monstrosity capable of resetting the world. However, after this long journey, cultivating such strong bonds with our friends, and mastering the combat system, we've got nothing to worry about. Yeah, Umbra is really challenging and tough, especially on expert mode, but with the fate of the world on our shoulders and with our loved one's life in danger, there's nothing that's going to get in our way. Unless you chose Yuna. Yeah, you're kinda fucked there. Not having your healer at the hardest fight of the game is a novel idea, but man, this shit took way longer than it needed to. Bullshit! Oh, what the fuck, man? But we have one last trick up our sleeves. You see those circles near my health? Well, just do 4 elemental attacks and watch as your enemy falls to their knees when you execute an all-out attack. In the end, we're able to defeat Umbra, but this comes with severe consequences. The person you chose as your special someone must also pass on since they fused with Umbra, coming together to form one new architect. And man, I just can't help but get choked up every time I see this. No matter what you do, you have to let whoever you chose pass on. The world can't continue as long as any semblance of Umbra remains. Press R2 to hold hands. I'm fucking trying, but they won't let me. Why do you want me to cry so badly? Letting go of the people you love is one of the most painful experiences we go through. There's no way to prevent it either. At some point, everyone's time on this earth comes to an end. It's about coming to terms with the notion that even if they're gone, it wasn't about the end. It was about the journey we shared, the memories we made, all that stuff. The hardest part, however, is what comes after. How do we move on from this experience? Do things just go back to normal? Do we act as if nothing happened? What's the right course of action? The only way forward is just that. Forward. We need to keep pushing on. It doesn't help anyone if we sulk in our miseries. The person we lost would 100% want us to push on, find new love, and live life to the fullest. We only get one shot after all. The story of Eternights was never about saving the world. Lux and Umbra's struggle wasn't the main point of the narrative. It was about the friends we made along the way in these uncertain times. It's about the love we found in the worst possible circumstances. It's the fact that even when humanity was pushed to their limit, we never lost sight of what was truly important. That shit's deep, man. It's the fact that Eternights isn't afraid to challenge the player's conventional way of thinking when given multiple options and dialogue. It doesn't want you to just move the story along. It asks you to genuinely care about each of the game's characters. Yeah, the writing can be kind of hammy sometimes, but I mean, these are a bunch of awkward teenagers who have no idea what to make of the current situation. With that context in mind, I find the awkward teen drama aspect to be kind of charming. On top of that, the gameplay is great, the aesthetic is fantastic, and the music ain't half bad either, although I'd really even struggle to call it music. Not to say that in a bad way, it's going for more of an ambient vibe sort of feel. One thing I do without fail every time is just take a moment as each day starts to kind of soak it in. I've waited a long time to get my hands on Eternights. I was in no rush to get through this journey, so it felt kind of right to just sit there for a moment while the music swelled through my ears. I think that's all I've got on this one, but if you would allow me just a few more minutes of your time, there's something I want to share with all of you. You know, it's funny. When I look back on it, this game is kinda where my content creation journey started. Back in 2019, life wasn't exactly going the way I had planned. Don't get me wrong, things weren't terrible, and I always had a great support system. I don't know, I always felt like I wasn't getting the most of what life had to offer. I was working a job I hated, I was always tired, and I just didn't want to do anything really. Playing Persona 5 was a really big deal for me. It came at a time in my life where to a degree I felt kind of alone. It showed me that video games are more than just something we engage with to pass time. It's something personal to each and every one of us. After finishing Persona 5 for the first time, this tweet showed up on my feed and instantly I knew exactly what the reference was. I told myself, one day I'm gonna make a YouTube video on this game. It was around this time where I really started getting into the idea of content creation, but I was a bit apprehensive. I needed to figure things out in real life before I could commit to the massive time sink being a creator presents. So I took action. I went and found a better job, I saved money, I got my own place, and I studied my favorite content creators to understand what it is that had me watching their videos on repeat. It's ironic that it was Eternights, a game full of references to Jay's favorite media, that was the start of all this. Don't get me wrong, there's so many content creators just on YouTube I look to for inspiration. In a way, I find myself emulating them whenever I get myself in front of a Google Doc screen to start typing a script. These guys have done more for me than they'll ever know. They've paved the way for all this. I seriously couldn't imagine the platform without them, and Jay is no exception. The first thing that came to mind when I saw that first tweet way back in 2019 was just how cool it was that Persona 5, my favorite game of all time, was able to have an effect on someone so much to the point where they wanted to try taking their own stab at the formula. Playing Persona 5 in 2019 when things weren't going my way, to playing Eternights in 2023 where I feel like my life is more stable, it's just kind of a crazy parallel. This game challenged me to look back on those hard times, and I definitely learned a little bit more about myself along the way. I haven't mentioned it yet, but I got a code for Eternights the day of launch. And let me tell you, getting that code was one of the happiest moments I've had in a while. I got a sense of validation when I got that email. Wow, one of the creators I admire the most in the world, Jae Hyun Yu, knows I exist. That's crazy! But that sense of excitement quickly became a point of stress for me. Talking about this game is really hard. I don't want to forget anything. I want to make sure I'm doing the game justice. But if I've learned anything after spending way more time in Eternights that's necessary, it's this. It's okay not to be perfect, because it's our imperfections that make us who we are. It's okay if I don't perfectly explain every mechanic in the game. It's okay if I don't go into full detail on every single dialogue interaction. I just need to say what I really feel. Us content creators need to open ourselves up to a degree each time we make a video. We have to pull the curtain back a little and expose ourselves to the world. That's really scary. I have trouble opening up to my best friends, my family. Having to do that every time I write a script, it can be a challenge, that's for sure. And although it was difficult, I think I accomplished what I set out to do. At the end of the day, people will look at Eternights as nothing more than just another anime-style JRPG. And sure, I guess it is. But really, it's more than that. So now I ask, if the world you knew suddenly came to an end, how would you spend your final days?
Don't you want to be the hero that saves the world? Suffers tremendously and gets a parade?
Breaking free. I'm breaking free. Breaking free. I'm breaking free. I'm breaking free. Am I important to you? Or are you all talk?
I'm not like you. I can't keep calm under pressure, but I'll try. I like you a lot.
I spent so many years avoiding the truth. I think I was trying to avoid that pain. I want to say thank you.
I finished writing my report on your arm. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to confirm our findings because Your arm now just keeps on guiding us to me.
Don't you want to be the hero that saves the world? Suffers tremendously and gets a parade?
It's a dream, just watch how I burn.